Today we have the pleasure of talking comics with up-and-coming creator Dan Waters. Dan has done a bunch of work for DC recently, including Detective Comics, Future State Superman and Wonder Woman. Most recently, he wrote Creature from the Black Lagoon for Image Comics imprint Skybound. Waters is set to work on a new Batman 12-issue maxi series that explores the Dark Knight's detective side, along with becoming the regular writer of Nightwing. We are sure there is much more to come from this talented writer.
Okay, so today we're here with Dan Waters, comic book writer, and most recently author of Creature from the Black Lagoon. Yeah, is that
That's
the
right?
most recent thing you have on market now?
Yes.
Great.
Destro is still coming out as well.
Oh, right, you're writing Destro. I forgot. I'm buying Destro, and it just slipped my mind that you were writing it. Yeah. I'm actually I'm a little behind in the reading, but I am buying the Energon stuff from Image right now because it brings up a lot of cool childhood stuff for me.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
I'm brand new to it, so it's been a learning curve.
Oh, really? Because that actually, now that I know that you're writing that, you don't have any previous like sort of experience with like the G.I. Joe franchise or any of that stuff?
No, I mean I'm British, so
yeah.
G.I. Joe is so intrinsically American. They changed the whole franchise when they brought it over to England. We had like Action Force and then Action Man, which was around when I was a kid. And it's a whole different kettle of. It's just sort of James Bond with the serial numbers filed off over.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah. I guess the whole idea of what G.I. Joe was here in America when I was a kid, when we were kids, it wouldn't really affect kids in England very much.
No, it wouldn't have hit with them.
Yeah, it wouldn't really have. Yeah, the very different expectations from heroes.
So has that been hard for you to write a G.I. Joe story not really knowing the history or the background?
I quite enjoyed it. It's nice, I know sort of like the DC universe very well and the Marvel universe very well. I grew up in all that stuff, but so it's nice to come into something where I don't, and it's like it's like writing into a mythology that you've just encountered, and you can sort of see the shapes of things and you understand how things work. But there are sort of, especially things that are kind of weird or unusual that you might take for granted if you've grown up with it.
Right.
That you can sort of point at and go like, why is that happening? Or why do they behave that way? And maybe like find a different angle on it.
Yeah.
So it's been cool. The Energon universe being a ground up thing has definitely helped with that.
Yeah. And Destro is actually, now that I think of it, a good character for someone outside of G.I. Joe nostalgia to write, because he's himself a foreign character, right? He's not. He's not an American. I forget where.
He's Scottish.
He's Scottish, right? So that's actually
so a little closer to where I'm.
A little closer, yeah.
Where I hail from, yeah.
Right. So yeah, that's interesting. That completely slipped my mind that you were writing Destro,
and you're reading it,
and I'm actually reading it. Yeah, but I'm a bit behind.
Yeah. So how does that work? Writing in that Eragon universe, I know there's so many people contributing. How do you keep track of what you can and cannot tell in that?
I mean, we started with an outline that got approved, and we've stayed very. I say we've stayed like I've done my part. It's finished.
So you're writing a story without, and no one's really telling you what you can and cannot do. You're writing your story independently.
Well, that kind of happened at the beginning. So there's a plan. There's very much a plan with the Energon universe, but I've worked with Josh Williamson before. At DC, and I'm pretty sure he's the one who suggested me for this. So we were able to sort of chat, and he was doing both Cobra Commander and Duke at the time, and so there was kind of this specific space to tell a Destro story sort of in the timeline, and it's like it begins here and it ends here, and there are these characters we want to introduce, but I was sort of throwing those puzzle pieces and gone, tell a story with that, which gave me a lot of leeway to sort of drill down into what I was interested in doing with the character.
Yeah, and for anyone not reading it, what it seems like what they're doing from the outside is they're kind of taking this sort of Marvel Cinematic Universe approach where they're introducing the characters individually, and then eventually we're going to get them all coming together at some point.
And that's going to be in the future. G.I. Joe and Transformers, right?
Yeah.
Coming together at some point.
I think there's rumors that there are other Hasbro products involved, but who knows?
It started with
Void Rivals was really the beginning,
right?
Yeah, which was an absolutely excellent series. So.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah. And
So you lead into that. You're also you did the Creature from the Black Lagoon. How was that for you? Were you a fan, Universal Monsters fan? How did you get pulled into doing that?
Yeah, I'm a fan of anything sort of horror centric, and I've grown up on that stuff in a real big way. Horror was more my gateway into sort of general nerddom than anything else. A lot of my creator own stuff tends to lean that way, or at least have a vein of that in it.
Mm-hmm.
But I came into that project kind of late because Ron V was initially tapped for that,
Right.
and then it took a while, and things sort of changed, and so he wasn't necessarily going to be able to do it. So he pulled me in to do the scripting, and then it kind of, as these things do, kind of span out in its own direction once the pen hit the page.
Mm-hmm.
No plan survives contact with the enemy.
Yeah, I loved it. You really humanized the creature in the story. A very different look at the creature from anything in the past.
Thank you. Yeah, we kind of wanted to take this approach of the creature being this lens that people project onto, because it's quite a blank slate, particularly compared to any of the other Universal monsters. I always think it's interesting that it's a film that came out a decade, like maybe longer after most of the other sort of tentpole films, and also wasn't based on something that came before.
Right.
You can maybe say that about the Wolfman, but the Wolfman's based on a lot of very kind of specific folklore.
Yeah.
But the creature's kind of cut from whole cloth and a whole new invention.
Yeah, and I mean, even the design of the original monster costume was something that just came out of nowhere, with Millicent Patrick designing it, and all that stuff being sort of not a pre-existing idea. Like people already had ideas about werewolves, but this creature, I mean, unless people were maybe avid readers of Lovecraft, at that time period, they're not going to have experienced anything like the creature, right? But outside the small group of people in the 50s who might have been reading Lovecraft, that would have been a brand new monster for them in a lot of ways.
I mean, this was in this universe. That's the second story from Skybound, right? Dracula was first.
Yeah,
Creatures and Frankenstein's going on right now. Is there any further plans for the monsters to at some point come together? And a bigger
I'm aware of.
Not that you're aware.
Because it seems to me like they're introducing each of the characters separately, and there's a plan to do something much bigger with them. Well, that's the way comic books are now, is it not? Now we create a universe.
Perhaps it depends. I think it's a case by case thing. It doesn't have to be a.
Yeah,
I'm a fan of letting things breathe.
Creature was great. Frankenstein's been so far. Really, I'm a big Universal Monsters fan since I was a kid. It's the movies I grew up watching when I was younger, and I it's one of those things. I'm a big superhero guy, so Brian's a big horror guy.
I'm more horror. Yeah,
I buy everything superhero, so it comes out. I buy a lot of DC, a lot of Marvel, but anything Universal Monsters, I tend to, and there's not enough out there, so I tend to pick them as much as I possibly can.
Yeah, actually, you wrote Lucifer story.
Yes.
Yeah, for DC, and I am a huge fan of the why am I blanking? The Sandman universe. Mm-hmm. Did you want to write Lucifer? Were you asked to do that? Was that a pitch you did, or?
Yeah, I was asked to pitch it. I was talking to, it was Jamie Rich at the time, who was running Vertigo, and he read my first book, Limbo, that I did with Casper Wingard at Image, and he invited me to pitch some original stuff, and then sort of just on the phone, he was like, "Oh yeah, we're also thinking about rebooting Lucifer. If you have any interest in that." So I sort of grabbed hold of that with both hands. That original Mike Carey run is I think some of the best comics.
Yeah, it's really
and that was an interesting one because I was a young writer at that point. I was maybe 25 or 26, and so I hadn't sort of cut my teeth on very much stuff written in other people's universes. So it was an interesting crash course because I did that for 2 years, 24 issues, and I had the best time in it. But once I sort of chased that car, and once I caught it, I had to work out what to actually do with it. And I realized that I had to go as far away from the book that I liked to make my own version of it. I had to push in total opposite direction to Carrion Gross to make it worth telling another story. Just picking up their threads, it seemed so pointless.
Right. Well, I mean, in the shadow of someone like Mike Carey, who was also writing in the shadow of Neil Gaiman, that ends up being very, I imagine, it's kind of intimidating if you don't distance yourself.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of my snotty attitude at work, though. That's where that kind of works for me. Is like, well, I'm going to do my own thing, and I'm not going to be, if you don't like it, then that's that. But luckily, people did.
Yeah. But you were gonna say?
Yeah. Sorry. Can you what you're leading to? This is one of your earlier works. Can you tell us about your comic book journey? How, like, when did you start reading comics as a kid? When did you decide you wanted to be a comic book writer? How did you get your feet wet in the business? What got you where we are right now?
A lot of time, a lot of graft, and a little bit of luck.
But you read comics as a kid. You were a fan.
Yeah. I mean, I'm British, so we had sort of Beano and the Dandy and these kind of, the British Dennis the Menace and his red and black stripy jumper and stuff. And my dad would get me those as a kid. And I had a couple of, they used to sort of staple 3 American superhero comics together and sell that as a single very confusing issue that you pick up, literally 3 entirely unrelated stories. No, not literally, but they were just reprints.
Right.
But you get those in sort of like W.H. Smith and stuff. And,
okay.
But they were quite pricey, so I had maybe half a dozen of them that I just read back to front until the sort of covers fell off. But they were really good stuff. It was like Boozy X Iron Man and Peter David Hulk and like really, really, really good stuff. So I sort of had those when I was younger. I didn't sort of find comic stores until I was probably at like college.
Okay.
But the local library when I was a teenager had a really good selection. So I kind of came in back that way, the way a lot of people do, where I sort of picked up a Constantine graphic novel and read voraciously loads of Lucifer, loads of that. And but all out of order as well, just picking up sort of random trades here and there, whatever other people hadn't taken out of the library. So I got quite into that stuff. I knew I wanted to write. I thought I wanted to do write horror films. That was, as a young man, thinking that was going to be a lucrative career option. So I went to college for I went to college for film studies. Kind of hated it. It didn't challenge me very much, and it was more sort of journalism geared. And I can't remember specifically how I came to sort of decide to write comic strips. I think the first couple of times where I went into the Forbidden Planet in London and saw just how many comics were on the shelves, I was like, oh, that's really cool. And what a cool job that would be to do. So I started kind of writing scripts with no idea what I was doing. And, but, through the sort of local scene and like I did an internship at like a very small British publisher, and I met Casper Wingard, and the two of us really gelled. He's off doing the power fantasy with Gillen now, but we always kind of come back together, and we've done a couple of Detective Comic backup shorts last year, and we did Homesick Pilots, which was 15 issues at Image right before that. So we've been working together ever since our first book, and sort of formed a little scene in London. With Ron V and Casper, Ryan O'Sullivan, the White Noise guys that I still talk to every day. And just kind of went from there. Pitched our first book to Image, that got picked up, and then a very sort of slow, steady slog towards people knowing who the hell I was.
And it's interesting because the way you're describing it seems to be what keeps, particularly in England and Europe, there seems to be these moments where suddenly groups of creators sort of gel, and then they make that jump across the ocean, and they come to America, and then they go to Marvel, they go to DC, and now Image, now and these other smaller companies and stuff. It starts with I guess the whole, what was the name of that cafe at Moore and Gaiman and all those people hung around in the early 80s, when they were all working at Warrior and 2000 AD, and then they all gelled, and then they came here, and then this seems to happen over and over again. It seems to be like a pattern, where we're constantly exchanging things back and forth, whether it's music or comics.
Yeah, I think it probably is. It probably is due to that, and you have these sort of, you end up with these sort of like enclaves.
Yeah.
But I think it's because you also get people who club together and keep at it, because it's pretty unrewarding, at least at first, because no one cares, no one's interested for a good long time. So you have to be very pugnacious. You have to really want to do it to make it happen. So having a group of other people who are trying and sort of being spurred by each other's success and commiserating in each other's failures definitely sort of helps keep your head in the game.
Yeah.
But yeah, and people who sort of think similarly as well. That I met Ram and Alex Packendale and stuff through Thought Bubble was in Leeds, now Harrogate, which is great Comic-Con. But as soon as we got talking, we're like, oh, we have similar ethos towards this thing and what we want to achieve in the industry. So you just find your people.
Yeah, and it always seems that, because we've done many interviews with writers and creators, and it always seems that happens. That even talking to the old guard, like we talked to Howard Chaykin, and we talked to Al Milgram, and their group was, Al Milgram's group was on Staten Island, and he lived here, and there was like 6 or 7 of them lived together in an apartment, and they traveled to the city every day and wrote for Marvel Comics. So I think it's always hard from either side of comics to find people who like comics like you do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And once you do, you stick with those people.
Mm.
Yeah.
So your first, you said your first thing for Image was Limbo, right? Was that your first published comic? You had something, right? No, Limbo was really your first published work.
Yeah, I had bits and pieces before that. Nothing I owned, and nothing that I like particularly go back to. Yeah. Limbo was the first thing that I did for myself, and Casper and I kind of did that as our own sort of mission statement. So that's definitely the one I think of as my first book.
I noticed also, I was doing some research on you online. You wrote a Shadow series, right?
Oh yeah.
The look on your face, I was like, oh wait, what did I do?
No, my head just went Sonic the Hedgehog because I've been seeing that trailer before every film. Shadow the Hedgehog. And I was like, no, the Shadow. Yeah. I did that with Cy Spurrier, which was a similar thing to Creature from the Black Lagoon.
Was that a character you wanted to work on?
Yeah, I would have liked to have done more. There was supposed to be a second book, but I don't know what happened there. This was a good long while ago at this point. But I had a cool story. I have a cool story that I would still like to tell with that character.
Yeah.
Who owns the rights to them?
I honestly don't know.
Who did you publish? Or
is it a family thing owned by the?
Yeah, I think so. It might be Condé Nast.
Condé Nast.
But it was Dynamite had the license at the time. I'm not sure what's happened with it now.
I'm wondering if they still do.
I don't think there's been a Shadow book for a while.
There hasn't. No, there hasn't. I'm a big fan of that character. I love listening to the old serials that Orson Welles used to do and stuff. And I just like that character. And it's one of those characters that I feel like when it's done right, it's so good, but for some reason it just doesn't catch. It's like Flash Gordon too. Like they keep doing Flash Gordon books and they're good, but for some reason it just doesn't catch. There's something doesn't catch, Honestly,
I think there's something in the aesthetics of those characters that we move further and further away from just culturally. That makes them anachronistic in a way that Batman, Superman aren't. They modernize a lot easier,
I guess.
I think that's really what's at the core of that. So finding a way to either utilize or work around that sense of anachronism is part of the challenge. And and it gears you towards like specific kinds of stories. So it makes them a little less malleable. But you know, that's just a challenge in its own right. It's just a different kind of storytelling.
Right. And again, like you said, you come from originally a horror background, so the Shadow is kind of horror adjacent. You know, you've written for Batman. Batman is kind of horror adjacent in a lot of ways. Is there any character that you've written that you feel like was really far away and you were like surprised you got
signed on for that?
Yeah, or that you even wanted to do it? Like
you wrote Future State for Superman and Wonder Woman, right? You contributed to that.
Yeah, I read
these
that
characters
one.
are really far from horror adjacent normally.
Yes, but I also love, you know, part of loving horror and things, I also love Harlan Ellison and Ray Bradbury,
Sure.
and those characters really let you do that kind of thing.
Right.
So, you know, I'm naturally geared towards horror adjacent things, and I sort of gravitate that way. But like, there are other muscles I really like to stretch when I get the chance. So I don't think really there's anything that I've, you know, there's been projects I've been less interested in, but then I've said no.
Right.
Like I'm writing Doctor Who as well.
Really?
But to be fair, that's also horror adjacent. Especially once I got my hands on it. So, but you know, it always was historically. It was the show that kids hid behind the couch.
Yeah.
Now, are you a fan? Are you a Doctor Who fan?
Yeah, I was the right age for the reboot or the new Who to hit. I was about 12 or 13 when that first came on TV, so I've followed that religiously since it started airing, because it's just something that lets you tell any kind of story, so you never know what you're getting week to week.
Now, how hard is that to write the comic book for? Seeing
really easy.
Such a long history, really, because it's such a long history.
Yeah.
You're allowed to do whatever you want with the comic book, or are there any guidelines you have to follow?
It's definitely guidelines, but I didn't get pushed back. There's sort of smaller, specific things that I would get pushed back on, but they didn't affect the story in any way.
I mean, because you go anywhere and do anything with him, right? You could really go anywhere.
Exactly. It's because it's not difficult to write, because the premise is there's a mad person in a blue box, and the blue box goes anywhere in time and space, and when he shows up, he wants to help. That's all you should, in my view, all you should need to know to go into one of those stories.
That's awesome. So you started with the Eccleston Doctor, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of where I started. I never watched Doctor Who when I was a kid.
Not me.
The old series. I never watched them.
Tom Baker.
Really? I never watched those. I mean, I caught up on them later when I liked it, but I never really watched those. And but the Eccleston one really caught me for some reason. And I was watching with my daughter, who was young at the time, and she loved it. And so yeah, that was a nice experience. I haven't watched recently, unfortunately. I kind of lost the time for it. So I think like Matt Smith was like the last one I really watched, but I got to catch up.
So who's your favorite Doctor?
I do like that Matt Smith era.
He was great.
Very sort of angry old man in a young body, and a lot of very horror fairy tale-y geared stories that just, I don't know, they just work for me.
Yeah. The Weeping Angels alone were like just a great thought, a great idea. You know,
and that episode, he's not even in it.
Right.
So that's to me, that's one of the best. That's one of our favorite episodes here in my house. And I made my kids watch it when Eccleston started. They were like 6 and 8 years old.
Oh my God, there's some scary stuff in there.
And they're still to this day, both my kids are hooked.
What's the one with the kid with the gas mask?
Oh, yeah, that's a good one too. Are You My Mommy?
Yeah, that was so scary.
The Empty Child, I think that one.
That's what it was called.
Episode.
Right.
Those are some great episodes.
Yeah, that was a scary one.
So if there was a character you could write right now, I know we'll talk about in a little while what you have coming up, because you have some huge stuff coming up, like huge stuff.
Well, the character
of all characters.
Yeah.
Who would you want to write for now if you had a choice? You work for a company, doesn't matter. You can work for any company. Who would you like to take a stab at?
I tend to duck this question.
Okay.
We ask this question of everyone.
I get it.
We ask this question right as we get on here. Who would you like to work with?
I don't know. It's a funny one, because if there's something I want to do so badly, with a character, there's generally a way to do it, whether it's in your own, file the serial numbers off and do it as your own thing, or
Sure.
I'm more interested in stories than characters, generally speaking. And I think that's, an important way to be as a writer, because you've got to write from the point of view of a writer and not from a fan.
Sure.
Because otherwise you'll just, like I said with Lucifer, you'll just repeat the beats of things you like. And I never want to be writing stuff where I'm just going, hey, remember this? And it's like sort of winking and nudging the whole time. It's always got to stand on its own 2 feet. But that said, there's a character I've wanted to write properly, who I have written before, but in dribs and drabs. That it looks like it might happen. So yeah, I'll duck the question that way.
So you can't tell us because it might happen.
Well, there's
hiding it.
There might also be a level of kind of you're afraid to jinx it, sort of thing, or you don't want to say it. That idea, or just
a little bit of that, a little bit. Don't want to ruin the fun.
Right. Gotcha. Okay. Gotcha. So, let's talk. Let's go to Nightwing.
Yeah, Nightwing before the big guy.
Yeah. Nightwing. Was that? Again, I'm coming back to the same question. Was that was a pitch you did? You were like, I want to work on Nightwing?
No.
Okay.
Because I didn't know it was coming free, so I would never. Tom and Bruno were winning every award under the sun for it as well. So the idea that I would go to the editors and go, give me Tom's book, is both extremely unprofessional and rude. And it would be, it'd be insane. I'd be offered lobotomy before I'd be offered while their run was ongoing. Mm-hmm. So that was a thing of that book coming to a natural end, then moving on to other things, and the sort of fresh start of DC All In. So I was approached for that by editor Jess Burby, who I had been working with on the backups for Detective Comics. Mm-hmm. So she'd seen me sort of deliver a script every month for these short stories that jumped around and touched on all different corners of Gotham, which were really fun to do. That was a really nice gig, because it was just 8 pages a month, and I just talked to Ram about what was happening in the main story, and we'd sort of zero in on something together. And certain things I wanted to do, I was like, all right, let me do another Azrael story, let me do a 10-Eyed Man story, these characters that I've kind of had some history with. That he was already kind of working in, because we enjoy working together, and we tend to have like a back and forth. He likes what I do in my books, I like what he does in his, so we'll always sort of pull from each other's work. So she'd seen me do that, and so my name clearly came up in the room when Nightwing came through. So I was approached for that, and they sort of said, don't want to rush you, but we need a pitch yesterday. So I sat down and came up with a Nightwing story, and here we are.
So that's issue 119, right? If I remember correctly.
That's it. Yeah.
And do you know how many issues you're slated to do?
Nope. I have a plan, but we'll see. It's always dependent on factors.
Mm-hmm. And when does that come out? When does 119 come out?
I remember the specific date, but the end of October. So I think FOC will be the end of this week.
So it's the new thing, right? All Out, right? That's
All In.
All In, right.
All In.
All In. All Out. So is the I don't know how much you can say. Is the character changing like Batman and Superman and Wonder Woman are changing, or it's basically going to stay the Nightwing that we know?
No, that's the absolute universe.
So
that's its own,
it's completely separate, right?
Yeah. So we're continuing. I'm very much looking at it as I'm picking up issue 119. So it should always be a jumping on point,
right? But
I don't want to in any way disregard or ignore the threads that have come before. We're picking up and sort of saying yes and to where Tom and Bruno have left the character and the city.
Who's doing the art with you? Who's the artist?
Dexter Soy.
Okay. So that's one of your big ones, but now the big one that sounds very interesting. You're doing a Batman 12-issue maxi series called Dark Patterns. It's basically exploring, is it more the detective side of Batman, right? Yeah,
that's exactly it. Yeah. So yes, 12 issues. I've been working on this thing for 2 years.
Wow.
It's been a real passion project. I've been working with Ariana Totoro, who's she was originally the associate editor on Lucifer, but that sort of quickly became kind of her book because we just really gelled, and she really saw what I was doing with it, and we've worked together kind of at least once a year ever since we did Azrael together. We did Arkham City together. She's really kind of championed me at DC since I started working there. So this has been the thing we've been working on for a good long while. Because just that it felt like there was a gap for this kind of book, this sort of Legends of the Dark Knight kind of storytelling. So I love that sort of things, like sort of pulling from like MPT Psycho and Hannibal, like that kind of grisly detective story, which I love those kind of stories, and I think Batman's such a good vehicle for them.
So what can you tell us about it? What other characters can we expect in there? And
so we're keeping the cast like purposefully very small. You're not going to see a ton of Batman outside of the cowl. You're not going to see a ton of Bruce Wayne. Right. It's very much Batman solving mysteries, and a very sort of fallible, breakable Batman. He gets really hurt. Is something that I also really wanted to have in this book. He's the first cover is definitely a sort of mission statement where he's covered in cuts and bruises and band-aids and bandages. The man just pushing himself way past his limits and just going on and on. So in terms of main cast, we have him, we have Commissioner Gordon, we have Alfred, and we have two new characters: a disgraced journalist called Nikki Harris, who's been reporting on the urban myths for sensationalist tabloids, but getting stuff right every now and then because it's Gotham. So he's reporting on the killer croc in the sewers and these kind of things. So Batman started using him as a resource, and we also have a forensic pathologist who's returned to the city, called Dr. Soreka. So there's we're definitely getting into that side of things. There are sort of, generally speaking, there's a body, and they're sifting through the evidence left on the corpse to find out who and what has happened to this.
It sounds really good.
It sounds great, yeah. And honestly, it's one of those sides of Batman that I feel like not enough creators lean into. The whole detective side, the crime story, they used to do it, and then they kind of got away from it for a little while. But I always like that part of it. That as an old school Batman fan from way back. When
is that hitting? When is that coming out?
That is December 11th, issue 1.
So
with Hayden Sherman and Triona Farrell, which is just like the best art team we could have hoped for. The original plan for the book, when Ariana and I started talking about it, was it's 4 cases across 12 issues, so 3 issues per case. And our original thought was to have 4 art teams so that we could pull in people who wouldn't necessarily, we were like, we'll aim big and we'll get some really good artists, and every arc will have its own feel. And but we were lucky enough that the first person we reached out to was Hayden, and Hayden said, yeah, I'll do it, but if you want, I'll do the whole thing. And we very quickly said yes, because Hayden's just astounding. So it's really become this book that really feels like it belongs to all of us, which is a really, really nice feeling.
That's cool. Now, are you going to be going around promoting it? You're going to be making appearances promoting it, or?
I imagine close to the time. I need to talk to my rep about that. But yeah, I mean, I'll
Or in
definitely
New
be doing
York now,
signings
so
and
you
things.
can. There's like
Yeah,
1,000 comic book shops and
yeah.
bookstores throughout New
There,
York
there'll
City.
definitely be things. I've been bad about appearances the last few years. It's been a weird couple of years.
Mm.
But my plan for the next year is to hit a lot more cons and signings and things.
So now you brought up the one of the things we always talk about here. Do you have any conventions planned? Specifically, are you going to New York Comic Con this year since you're in New York now?
I will be at a New York Comic Con, which I'm very much looking forward to. I haven't done a convention since, what was it? Thought Bubble 22. So it's been a hot minute
So you have
since
a
I've made it
table
to
at
a
New York,
convention.
or you're?
Yeah, I do. I can't remember the number off the top of my head, but I'm sure if you look it up, you'll be able to find it.
Is it your first time at New York?
It's my first time. Actually, it's not quite. I did some signings the year before last, sort of hour slots.
Okay.
But this is my first time with my own table.
Nice.
I will be there.
I'm not going. Yeah, I'm getting a lot of heat. I'm not going though.
We went together last year, and Brian had a really tough time with how crowded it is, and he was. I've gone every year since my daughters now are 24 and 22. We've gone every year since they were like 8 and 10. So it's
Nice.
what I do with my kids. So
Yeah.
I'll definitely stop by your booth to say hello in person.
Mm-hmm.
It's overwhelming. We go to a lot of conventions, the two of us together, a lot of smaller ones. New Jersey has tons. Convention every weekend if you really wanted to. So we go to a lot of smaller ones. New York is overwhelming. Last week was Baltimore. We skipped that one. It's just too far of a drive. Do you have anything else coming up besides New York at this point?
Nothing confirmed. I'm sort of. I was given a list for next year. That I sort of said, yeah, just whatever works, whatever's
I mean,
easiest.
all of them.
So yeah, I'll just hit them all. No, that starts to impact the work. I've done that before, which is there's a balance.
Yeah,
I would imagine because you could be at one every weekend, and how do you do your job if you're
Yeah, especially if you're late on a script and then you're tweeting, you read it, so what you tweet about.
It's funny. We interviewed Howard Chaykin about 2 or 3 months ago, and he was saying how much he loves traveling. He goes to Europe, so anytime they ask him to come to Europe, he just says yes and spends a weekend in France. And
but he's also Howard Chaykin.
He's Howard Chaykin.
Yeah, but and I don't think is he writing much right now?
Not
really, right?
No, I guess
I don't know. He does covers though.
Yeah,
but yeah. What was I going to say?
I have another question. So
because I'm blanking.
See if you dodge this one. Who would you like to work with that you haven't worked with already? So if there's an artist out there who you really would love their work and would say, I would really love to work with this artist on, any project you have coming up.
Ooh, that's a quite on the spot question. Honestly, I'm looking forward to working with the artists I've kind of cut my teeth with again. That's kind of what excites me. Is so Danny, Casper Wingard, like those guys have very much become my kind of ride or dies, and it's always a joy when we get to collaborate again because we'll do a book and then we'll go off and we'll both do other things and learn new tricks. Gain new readers and things, and then we get to come back a little bit stronger and make something new. And the next one's always my favorite. So
you never know who you're going to meet at New York Comic Con. You never know who's in the booth next to you.
But I do. It's Danny. But
I think you know already. So there you
go. Do you have? I wanted to ask. Actually, I just realized it popped back into my head. Do you have a set? I always ask this about writers. Do you have a set process that you follow, or is it sort of just
like wish? I have ways of outlining. There are certain rules of thumb that I follow, but and I've become far more fascinated by and interested in, those mean the same thing, uh, structure. As I've developed as a writer. I used to think it was limiting, but then I realized that I was just watching people do it badly,
Mm-hmm.
or teach it badly as well.
Yeah.
Really, I think structure is about understanding how human thought essentially works, and how it's kind of how learning works, because
Yeah.
every story is about learning, even if it's just the reader learning what's going on. So the core of my sort of approach to it is every story is a dialectic.
Mm-hmm.
It's a thesis and an antithesis, and they slam together into some sort of synthesis.
Mm-hmm.
But that still lets you go kind of anywhere with it, because a synthesis
sure.
can be one conquering the other. It can be, the other one winning out. Generally, it's some sort of messy merging of these two opposing forces, and then you get to do it again and again and again and again. So yeah, I love structure. I think it's fascinating, and if you do it right, it's not at all limiting. It should be very, very freeing. So yeah, my process is to generally sit down and work and make sure that's happening in the story that I've got in my head.
Yeah.
I do a lot of like notebooking. I use these. Okay, always just a creature of habit, and I use the same moleskin. I replace them as soon as I get to the end. People buy me other kind of nice notebooks as gifts and stuff, which is always like very appreciated and a very thoughtful gift. But they just sort of sit in the stack because I'm just going to buy the same moleskin over and over and over again. And I do I put everything into my head down in there, because it's not real. It's just for me. And then when I kind of run out of steam there, I'll switch over to the computer and start typing it into an actual script.
Right. And do you do full script? Do you do like panel by panel, or do you do like a screenplay style, or you do panel by panel?
I think it's a pretty, it's expected. I think if you hand anything else in, you get some sideways looks. But I also do definitely think, I think there's an easy trap to fall into where you can think that because you've written out a page and you've written sort of panel 1, panel 2, panel 3, panel 4, panel 5, and you've written like some description for each panel, that you've done your job. But really, what's more important is to hand your artist a blueprint for a page or a splash or whatever. Hand them something that's inspiring, and really evokes what kind of theme you want to get across. Like quite often I'll put, above where the panel start, I go, okay, so like Dexter on Nightwing, I'll be say, hey Dex, this is what we want to communicate on this page. Like this is the feelings, this is the kind of, so if there are other ways you want to go about this, then go wild, but this is the important information that we need to get across this page. And I think that can be, hopefully both kind of freeing for the artist, but also I just think it's a better way of getting the job done and actually ending up with a good comic rather than ending up with a good script.
Right. Yeah. So do you consider things like pacing and all that stuff too? Like how long they spend on this page, how long they spend. Okay.
Yeah. And that's part of, paneling and all these kind of things. I have a kind of bugbear for, there are certain specific things, and some of these might just be specific to me. Like I don't like opening a comic and page 1 is 7 panels with like 3 balloons per page. That, to me, that doesn't invite you into a story. That that's just work. You just give, you haven't invested, you haven't got any investment yet. So don't you need to pull the reader in before you can make them start committing to that kind of pacing, that kind of slow crawl.
Right.
So there's a million factors, and they're kind of things that you learn by doing and paying attention.
Yeah. So the idea of like the old Bronze Age and early Copper Age, where they would just open with like a splash page and sort of like get people to be like, oh, this is the, here's what you're gonna, here's what's grabbing you. You know what I mean? That's what you're talking about, sort of that idea of like grab them on the
It
first.
doesn't have to be a splash. It's just it's like very few movies. I would say, like, you think about it that way. Very few movies start with, roll credits, and then immediately there's just two people talking at each other.
Right.
You don't get that. You get scene setting. You get brought into a scene,
things like that. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
And I think those things are important and kind of undervalued sometimes.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so I'm always interested in writing process.
I know he's an ELA teacher, so he always hits his writing. So you have
I can talk about this stuff for hours,
and he would listen for hours. So you have Batman Dark Patterns coming out. You have Nightwing coming out. Is there anything else that you're working on coming out that you want to talk about, promote? It sounds like you have your hands full with both of those, but maybe there's something else.
Yeah, making those two good is definitely right now. I'm working on two other licenses. So this year's been Creature from the Black Lagoon, it's been Doctor Who, it's been Destro. I'm working on two other miniseries, different licenses that aren't announced yet, and other bits and bobs.
Do you sleep?
Yeah, I sleep just fine. I try not to
have
do
time to sleep. Sounds like you're writing 5 or 6 things.
I'm busy, but I also there's other people working harder than me. I sit at a keyboard and knock out scripts, and I have a great time doing it. So I like to dispel the sort of woe is me comic writer sort of.
It's nice to be busy, but most of the people we talk to, and we've talked to a number of writers working on 1 or 2 things at the moment. You sound like you have like 5 things in the pot right now, and 5 big things, not 5 little things. So it sounds like you really, you have a lot going on.
Yeah. I mean, I'm busy, but these projects stagger, so I'm generally on about 3 to 4 scripts a month, which it gives you a week per script, maybe a little over. Sometimes it things can kind of snowball when it comes to lettering passes and approvals and all that kind of stuff, where you've got sort of 5 or 6 projects. You finished writing a few and you started a few in production, then you've got to do all of those bits for 5 or 6 books at once. That can be a little too much, but I try and stagger my projects so that that doesn't happen as much as possible.
Right. So you're not confusing Batman and Destro in the same story. So you have 2 things coming up that at this point can't talk about. So
it'd be a weird story.
Well, it would be. We'll have to have you on again at some point to talk about those. Coming to the end of our interview. So how long have you been in New York now?
About 3 months at this point.
So
I spent the last 2 years sort of jumping around between New York, London, and Athens.
Okay. Is there anything you haven't done yet in New York that you would like to do?
Most of the touristy stuff, honestly, I haven't been out to Ellis Island yet.
Neither have I, and I've lived here my whole life.
Any of that stuff. Yeah, I mean, I've been told that that's the mark of a true New Yorker, right? Is that you don't do any of that stuff.
Never been up to the Empire State Building.
No, me neither.
Never been to the Statue of Liberty.
I've been inside of it, but never to the top.
I've been inside of it, never to the top. Yeah. Same thing. I worked right on a comic book for many years.
Yeah.
Again, two lifetime New Yorkers. And have you visited any good comic shops in New York?
Yeah, I mean, we got Everyone Comics is my local store, which is a lovely store. So yeah, shout out to those guys.
Nice.
There you go. Do you collect at all, or?
Don't like to admit this as a monthly writer, but I'm a bit of a trade waiter just because I don't have space right now for. I have a huge collection in a lockup in London.
Okay.
Yeah. I actually tend to buy a lot.
Don't say it.
I'm not saying that.
Don't say it.
I'm not going to say what you think about it.
Don't say it.
I tend to buy more trades than I do monthlies because, again, same thing, space.
And what else do you read?
I'm not talking about
Don't.
that.
Brian reads online, which
Oh,
Is unforgivable for collectors.
unforgivable. Because Dan, if I turn the camera around right now, I believe I am up to 8 entirely filled file cabinets behind it.
Yes.
Filled from front to back with stuff from my youth to stuff that came out last week.
Well, yeah, the stuff, the monthlies I buy are the Image, Dark Horse,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. The big two I read online. Yeah.
Should you go read Dark Patterns online to the guy who's writing it?
No, I might buy a trade of that.
That's kind of poor business sense there.
Buy a trade of that.
That's kind of poor business sense there, Brian. What is there anything right now you're reading that you're enjoying right now?
Yeah, like what's a big one right now? But or maybe a trade you've read recently that you really
something that like right for me right now. It's a Batman story. Mike Allred's Batman's Dark Age is fantastic.
Oh yeah, I've read the first 2
Fantastic.
issues of that. I got to catch up.
Absolutely,
that's a really good one.
We had Mike on, and he's building the world. So he's doing Wonder Woman next in the same vein as he did Superman. That's
cool.
Great
yeah, I look forward to that.
Very, very different look at the characters in the past.
Yeah,
so that's what's on the top of my list right now.
Yeah. Is there any trades you would recommend to anybody other than, of course, your own?
Other than your own.
Yeah, I mean, 20th Century Man really blew the doors off. I think there's this sort of generation of, I think, an approach and to sort of superhero books. So 20th Century Men and the Power Fantasy are both they're the things that I find very exciting right now. This sort of globalist approach to superhero comics, so they're a little more patient, a little more novelistic. It's kind of, to me, it's a kind of building on the sort of early 2000s Ultimates and Authority and things, but with a little more focus on. A lot of those books were kind of dissecting the comic book tropes in relation to a certain kind of realism is quite the right term, but sort of a more modern version of the world. Whereas I think these books are kind of doing the opposite, where the tropes just become this vehicle to talk about more political concepts.
I'm gonna look for those actually, because I haven't read either of those. But
who's publishing those?
Sounds like something I would like.
Who's that coming from?
Image. Both those are Image books.
Yeah.
Good recommendation for you.
Yeah,
you can read it online.
Yeah.
Anything else you'd like to add?
I'm not going to read it online. I'll buy it.
Anything you'd like to add before we go out? I will come visit you at New York Comic Con, and if any of you who are listening are at New York Comic Con, go say hi to Dan. Pick up whatever he has.
I look forward to meeting you.
It will be it's so crowded there. It's just so insane there.
Yeah, it'll be Chad briefly waving to you as he's swept away into the crowd, like
insane.
Yeah, so that is the nice thing about having a table is you have an anchor.
Yeah, but
have
you ever been to San Diego?
Yeah, I've done it once. I'm planning to go again next year. But yeah, I enjoy them both. I've done sort of panels and things. I'm doing the Gotham panel this year at New York, which will be a lot of fun. And to be honest, I'm just looking forward to having a load of friends roll into town.
That's a lot
from back home and across the states.
Yeah, you get to hang out with your friends at these conventions, and it's on someone else's dime. So why not?
Not so much, but
why not?
No, not really.
It's worth it.
Listen, if you need any advice, we've been to many of the conventions up the East Coast, and we can Terrific Con is phenomenal. Terrific Con is probably one of the best cons. What are you going to say? Best
we
con.
might be the last people anyone's going to want to do for advice.
Why would you not? We've been to more conventions than most people we know. But Terrific Con, I don't know if you've ever been there. It's in.
I haven't. I've done very few stateside, so I'm looking forward to doing that.
Terrific Con is
seeing more of the country.
It's in Connecticut.
It's in Connecticut. It's in Mohegan Sun. So once you're finished with the convention, you can gamble for hours on end. And
Perfect.
That's what we do. I go there and we do the convention, and then and the guy who runs it is a great guy. It's a really, really good convention worth going to.
Mm.
Do you have any suggestions convention wise?
No, not really. Do whatever you like.
Just do what I'm told.
Yeah. You must be married. If my wife watches this, I'm in so much trouble.
Yeah, you're going to be.
Dan, thanks for taking the time with us.
Yeah, we appreciate all the time you've given us.
We appreciate it.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you.
So everyone,
thank you for having me on.
Before we go, everyone, keep your eyes open for Batman Dark Patterns,
Nightwing,
and get out there and read anything else with Mr. Waters' name on it.
Doctor Who, Nightwing.
Yep.